Hey, everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 192, recorded March 7th, 2012. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
And I'm Josh Walrath.
We are Sans Allen. We are Sans any fourth person. What's ironic here is that I'm in San Francisco for GDC and an NVIDIA event, and actually Matt Smith is here with us as well, but we weren't smart enough, which shouldn't be a stretch, and we didn't take the time to figure out how we could hook up two USB headsets to the same laptop and join the audio to send one stream to Skype. I'm not sure if it was possible anyway, but we decided, so he's downstairs kibitzing with people anyway. But we have a lot of stuff to cover, not a lot of time to get to it. So let's start with talking a little bit about Windows 8. I think that has that happened since our last podcast?
Yes, it has.
Yeah, the release of the consumer preview. I guess it was on February 29th. That's right. It was on Leap Day. They released it. Have any of you guys personally tried it?
I mean, I tried the developer's version, and I don't think it's that much different.
No, I don't think it's too dramatically different.
No, as far as I've heard, it's more stable, and you can't even put the start button in by a registry hack anymore. But, apart from that, it's pretty much the same.
Nice. Tim Very actually wrote an article on PCPer.com that goes over the process of installing Windows 8 consumer preview in a virtual machine. Now, the benefits of that are, say you are a consumer or you're an enthusiast and you want to try out Windows 8, but you don't want to format your machine. You don't have an extra machine to try it on. You don't want to, upgrade your machine or whatever that kind of stuff is. But you have, a little bit of technical knowledge here. You can actually go through using VirtualBox, which is a VM software, instead of a virtual machine on your current Windows 7 PC to run Windows 8 in, so you can just swap back and forth or start up the virtual machine and give Windows 8 a try. He has a pretty good step-by-step here on how to get it, and I must say the opening desktop for Windows 8 Consumer Preview is really dumb looking with that fish with the bubbles type of thing.
Look at the aliasing. Good Lord.
Yes.
So all you need is a fairly recent desktop or laptop computer, 4 gigs of memory, 15 gigs of hard drive space, latest version of VirtualBox, which is free, I believe, Windows 8 Consumer Preview ISO, which is also free, and the Windows 8 Consumer Preview CD key, which I thought was hilarious that they gave out one CD key for all of the Consumer Preview users. It's just one line of text, and it takes them only about 30 minutes to set it up, and you can judge for yourself whether or not you think the Metro user interface will be worth a damn, and that kind of stuff. I wouldn't judge performance too greatly by it because you are installing in a virtual machine and that type of thing. But if you want to get a feel for how the applications work, how the switching between the new Metro user interface and the standard user interface is, that is an easy way to do it. So I have not had more than a couple of hours of time with Windows 8, so I'm not real comfortable talking about it personally or individually here. Do you guys have any other kind of comments, or do you just want to move on to some other hardware goodies?
Is Windows 8 going to be the Windows ME of this generation? Because Windows 7 is pretty damn solid.
I wish that it would be, but it's not going to be because it's going to be, oh, look, it's a giant cell phone. Doop, doop, and it'll sell. Well, I guess I'm going a little low there. But it'll be a little
Windows
touchscreen.
operating systems never had a problem selling.
Nope.
It was always, Windows ME probably sold a lot because they sold computers with it. It didn't mean it didn't suck. But there's that picture going around on the interwebs that is like every other iteration of Windows is bad, good, bad, good, bad, good. XP was great. Vista was bad. Windows 7 was great. Fill in the blank. I don't really think Vista was that bad, but
bad.
If you follow that logic, you've got that.
So Star Trek logic.
Yeah, exactly. So the other big news of the week was obviously the release of AMD's Radeon HD 7800 series of cards. These are the Pitcairn GPU-based cards. We've already talked about the 7900s. We've talked about the 7700s. And now we discussed the 7800s. And in my opinion, the 7800 cards are probably the ones most worth discussing. They're the ones that I think will find their way into the most enthusiast PC gamers' hands. And they are,
is this kind of like the GTX 460 of this generation so far that we have seen?
I don't know because the GTX 460 was a great card because it wasn't because it was great performance per watt. It was because it was great performance per dollar. It kind of changed the kind of pricing scheme that we had at the time. And the 7870 and 7850 are very close to that. And I think AMD was only 20 or $30 price difference away from making that same kind of impact. As it stands now, the 7870 and 7850, both of which have 2 gigs of frame buffer, sit at $350 and $250 MSRP when they actually go on sale. What did I say? March 19th, I think is the actual date there. Something like that, 18th or 19th.
Yeah.
They sit between the 7700 and 7900 in performance. I'm trying to look here for my stats. They have 1280 stream processors for the higher end unit, 1024 stream processors for the lower end unit, 2 gigs of frame buffer, which is actually really nice because now you're talking about a $250 video card where every version of that $250 video card will have more frame buffer than NVIDIA's current top of the line GTX 580. There's 1.5 gigabytes. Let you buy one of the special editions or something like that. And that actually becomes fairly important when you look at things like Battlefield 3 at ultra settings. Even the GTX 570 with 1.25 gigs of memory has run into some issues at 2560 by 1600 at ultra settings, not having enough frame buffer. It turns out after some talks,
Skyrim with the big texture pack.
Yeah, it's funny because we chose our benchmark areas inside these games completely independent of what these graphics companies tell us or whatever. We play a portion of the game, find out what we think best represents the majority of the game, in some cases what represents the hardest parts of the game, and use those sections to test. For Battlefield 3, we apparently picked like the worst possible location for benchmarking, which is great in my mind because we are actually showing you worst case scenario, and you always want to you want to show people what the worst case scenario is, so that you are getting the best card that's going to provide you the best minimum gameplay experience. Going off on too many tangents here, are the 7870 and the 7850 the GTX 460? They're really good cards. They are really good cards. So let's focus on the 7870. It comes in at $350. It competes almost directly with the GTX 570. In performance-wise, it's close, but I give the edge to the 7870 there, mostly because it has the performance edge on some of the newer titles, and again, it has that larger frame buffer. What's more interesting is that even in some of those cases where it does win against the GTX 570, it actually approaches the performance of the GTX 580 as well, which sells for $440 or something still. So you're talking about $470, right? So we're talking about $120 price difference between the 7870 and the GTX 580. It runs at a base clock speed of 1,000 megahertz. So of course, it's the 7870 gigahertz edition, which is stupid, but I digress on that. 175 watts of power. It requires 2 6-pin power connections. It runs very cool. It's very efficient. Overclocking, we got up to 1,200 megahertz, so we saw a 20% increase in clock speed, just by doing nothing. The 7850 runs at 860 megahertz, 130 watts total power draw, a single power connection. It competes. Its story, performance-wise, is actually a little more interesting because it sits directly between the GTX 560 Ti and the GTX 570 in terms of pricing. It's actually priced pretty close to the 560 Ti as it is today, but it blows the GTX 560 Ti out of the water in terms of gaming performance. And it comes close to the 570 in a couple of cases, but most of the time it's a little bit behind. But considering the GTX 570 is $90 more expensive, that's not really that surprising. But the 7850 was a great card, I think, for that $250 price point. Of these two cards, the one I'm probably most impressed with its positioning in the market is the 7850. They're both really good cards. And I think with a little bit of tweaking, the 7870 can look just as good, but I have a feeling NVIDIA will be bringing that kind of GTX 570 pricing down. Look, there's no secret that Kepler is going to be coming out relatively soon, and NVIDIA could very easily dampen the spirits of AMD's GPU team by simply dropping the prices on current Fermi parts just to, A, clear them out of the channel, and B, uh, just really want to stick it to AMD. Now, whether or not they will depend on, I'm sure, whether or not they actually see sales drops because of it. So I don't know. What
But
do you
if
guys
you
thought
kind of look
on?
at things, going along that line of how much the pricing is, didn't AMD build a whole bunch extra, I guess, pricing, leverage and, cushion with these parts? Because even though it's based on the 28 nanometer process, it's more expensive per wafer. These parts are actually smaller than the previous generation HD 6870 series
Mhm.
parts. I mean, it's significantly smaller. So you're hoping, more dies per wafer, cheaper amount of money per die, and we saw those, at the high-end HD 6870s going for $179. So we've got the high-end at 350 now,
Yeah.
and the 7850 at 250. You would think that we would have at least $30 of leeway in there within the first quarter, that they could still make some pretty significant cash off of these products, because they're not basing them on screwing Nvidia. It seems like they're basing them on getting the most money out of these products upon introduction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, doesn't that depend really on uh, the yield from TSMC, whether or not they built in kind of financial wiggle room?
Well, they probably did, and from all indications, 28 nanometer was not a bad yield for AMD. It was an
Mhm.
initial type yield, and it was in expectations from what I've heard. So yeah, it's not the mature 40 nanometer process that the BART's architecture was made on, but at the same time, it's still a significantly smaller chip. It's got a lot of performance, and I mean it was what the 6850 was $159, $149 for the most part. So you've
Yep.
got $100 of wiggle room in there for just the low end parts, and you're getting a significant increase in performance. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see when Nvidia comes out with Kepler, what they would do with pricing.
Yeah, I agree. So it's if Nvidia is aggressive with it, it will force AMD to be aggressive. We assume that the GTX 680, whatever it's going to be called, is going to be faster than 7970. And what I'm hoping is that they take. I hope for the sake of enthusiasts in the market, and that we need people buying these products in general, is that they take the stance that AMD once took as the second card to be released, which is, well, we know what their performance is now. Let's take our 680 that performs, I don't know, 15 or 20% better, and price it at the same amount, which will then force this waterfall effect of price drops down the line. I don't know if that will happen. It's not usually something NVIDIA does. It's not usually the way they act. They usually tend to price it as high as they can as well. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, but
I'm trying.
Nvidia also still has a lot of product out on the market, and the last thing they want to do
Yes.
is chunk prices so bad that they're taking a loss.
Well, it depends on what products they're going to release first. Are they going to start with the 680? Are they going to start with the 660? What? There was still some debate and argument on what they were going to do there, right? I think originally we heard they were going to release mid-range stuff first. I don't know if that's still the case, because my understanding is that the 570s and 580s are at a probably of production availability. But if you look at the 560 Ti and below, I think there's a lot more of that in the channel left. So it may make sense to get that high end out first still, while leaving the 560 products in the mid range price to compete with AMD for a while until they kind of run things through, or their yield improves, or their the throughput from TSMC improves, that kind of thing. The last thing I'll say about this before we move on really is that this more or less completes the 7000 series family from AMD. We have the 7970 all the way through the 7750. There will be some other parts. There will be 7600 cards, and there's going to be a 7990. We already know that's a dual Tahiti part coming out soon. But for the most part, this is the range of options that exist for consumers looking to buy a graphics card. One of the pages on a review, the Radeon HD 7000 family comparison, I thought actually gives you a very good overview of how these cards compare. one of the things I do like about the pricing scheme that AMD has is it's very simple. Down the line, you go 549, 449, 349, 249, and then 169 and 109. So it's pretty close to this $100 waterfall effect, which I think actually simplifies things. I don't have any hope that it will stay that way in any kind of fashion. But if you look at that page, you'll see some 3D Mark numbers, Deus Ex, Metro 2033, how it scales through the family from the top end card to the lowest end card. And for the most part, it's relatively linear, what you get there. And power consumption is actually interesting as well. You can see the idle power consumption is pretty static between 86 and 88 watts under idle. This is the full system load, not the individual card. And then power consumption as well. One other thing I guess I should mention, since we talked about performance, is if you look at power consumption of the new AMD 7800 cards against the NVIDIA cards that they're going up against, it's a dramatic difference in power consumption. Look at the 7870 versus the GTX 570. You're seeing a difference of like 80 plus watts difference there. And performance is leaning towards the 7870. And if you look at some of the cases where the GTX 580 might be at risk compared to the 7870, you're talking about 120 watts of performance difference or of power consumption difference between those two cards. That is dramatic. And even the if you look at the 7850 versus the GTX 560 Ti, where the 7850 is a much faster card, the 7870 does that while using 56 fewer watts of power in doing it. Obviously, there are advantages to AMD's architecture. There's advantages to 28 nanometer process technology, and these are some of the gains from that. Let's see. Oh, and also we did post a little update that compares the 7870 and 7850 to the HD 58.
5870.
Yes, thank you. I was choking on myself, I guess.
That's
but talented. We had some people ask about that directly because the 5800 cards were very popular purchases back in the day, so we wanted to see what the performance differences were, and we didn't really include that in our original article. Versus the 7870, you're talking about a 35% performance difference, and versus 7850, you're talking about a 15% performance difference in the couple of tests we threw up there as well. So if you're interested in that information, take a look. Josh, I know you didn't attend this meeting necessarily about the Asus Z77 chipset motherboards. What did you have any thoughts after looking over these kind of photos and that type of thing? I mean, the Z77 launching soon, obviously for Ivy Bridge, but we keep hearing about delays. Anything stick out at you from these?
It's
these few Asus boards.
Like, from everything that I've seen, it's almost like the jump from the AMD 890 chipset to the 990. What exactly have they added to it that is a big positive? I mean, is it USB 3.0 is the big feature set, or am I reading this wrong? But I mean, of 2 slots of SATA 6G. They haven't gone to the full 6 slots. It supports the native PCIe 3.0 that the new chips from Intel all pretty much power. And so this seems like it's kind of boring. But I think it's that logic is going to get more boring as time goes on because just keep integrated more and more functionality onto the CPUs.
Yeah, it's definitely not that exciting. Chipsets and motherboards in general have not been that exciting. Z77, the main features are support for Ivy Bridge. It is PCIe 3. It's USB 3.0 integrated. But Asus has done some interesting things with their motherboards, actually. And if you look at the 3 major brands, and I know that cuts some companies out, but Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte, Asus continues to be like the one in the forefront. They're not doing everything first, but they're doing really good things. And if you look at stuff like their fan controller software that they built, both in Windows and in the UEFI, BIOS and that kind of stuff, you'll see that they spent a lot of time making it user friendly, and the ability to run a program that will find the maximums and minimums of your fans, so you don't have to know that, and it will help you, set that controller. You can label them where they're placed, set your curves as you want, have it automatically take care of that stuff. It's pretty interesting. They are implementing Wi-Fi on all of the
So they got the
Z77.
Wi-Fi's and the bigger GBs.
You got to have the bigger GBs for sure. But it's they're doing what they can to make themselves more intriguing to the consumer than MSI and Gigabyte. And one of the things that they talked about a lot at this event was, they're probably going to come out with an extreme board. Don't tell anybody I told you guys, but they're holding off displaying, even talking about to the media in previews what the features are going to be on this board, because they feel that every time they come out with something, it's copied or duplicated relatively quickly. Now, people who have a history or knowledge of what happens in Taiwan in terms of engineering resources and understands that there are no secrets there, chances are these guys already know. But they've done really neat things with motherboards that, as you're saying, have the potential to be very kind of bland and boring if you let them be that way. The
Just
Maximus
ask Oscar Wu. Oscar
the
Wu knows
Maximus
all.
5 the Maximus 5 formula board is going to have some pretty cool features on it, including the Wi-Fi Go. The Maximus boards have a riser card that supports both a mini PCIe and a mini SATA port on them. So you can add an SSD, and you can add either another SSD or a Wi-Fi card or Bluetooth card or a TV tuner or anything like that. Those are kind of cool features you can add. There's going to be they've done some cool things with the audio, trying to improve motherboard audio, isolating the traces for the audio on its own layer of the PCB, separating them out that way, trying to get the best audio quality possible from that. And they're claiming that the audio solution that they did not reveal the chip for, the codec for, is going to be better than the majority of discrete cards out there on the market as well. So, and then the other cool thing was the mini ITX Z77 board. I thought that was pretty sweet, actually. What do they call it? The P8Z77i
V, or is it the I Deluxe or the V Pro?
No, it's the mini one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not the micro ATX, the mini ITX.
Yeah,
So it's the P8Z77i. There you go, deluxe. It's a mini ITX board. It has two two DIMM slots, one full-size PCI Express slot. You just got all your SATA ports. It's got 4 SATA ports on there, 2 on the back. It's got support for HDMI, DisplayPort, DVI, Wi-Fi integrated, gigabit Ethernet, 4 USB 3.0 ports, eSATA ports. I mean, there's a ton of features on this little tiny board, and I think it still has 8-phase power or something like that as well. And some of the guys from ASUS were saying that it overclocks really, 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 really well for an ITX solution. So depending on what your desires are, I mean, this is the kind of board that you would definitely, I don't want to say definitely, but you would lean more towards if you're going to use the integrated graphics on Ivy Bridge or Sandy Bridge. Since if you're going to use discrete graphics, it seems like you might as well just have a larger case anyway. But pretty interesting stuff there. Also, speaking of chipset and motherboards and that kind of stuff, Steve did publish a review of the MSI X79A GD65 8D, which is one model number for one motherboard, by the way. LGA 2011. This is a Sandy Bridge E motherboard. If you're looking for some reviews on Sandy Bridge E, you can go check it out. He actually used a Core i7-3820 processor, which is the quad-core version of Sandy Bridge E. If you look at those processors, you don't have to worry about PCI Express lane compatibility because you got more than enough for SLI and Crossfire and that kind of stuff. And overclocking, he was able to get the processor up to 4.625 gigahertz without much trouble. And I think if I look here at the automatic OC Genie button, they were able to hit just over 4 gigahertz on that just by pushing a single button. which is nice.
And the monkey pushes the button.
And it gets a slight overclock from it, which sounds a lot weirder than it does. It did get a gold award, something like that. So check out that review if you are so interested. And then let's talk about this real quick. This was an editorial that I actually posted up today on my way to GDC. I thought it was going to be the last article I ever wrote on this laptop, but it looks like I might get one or two more out of it. The title that we came up with is "Visual Computing Still Decades from Computational Apex." Maybe I should have chosen a different title.
Well, look at that Apex type head.
That's right. So this was it's basically an editorial that I wrote based on a discussion that Tim Sweeney gave at DICE earlier this year, where he discusses the somewhat common theory that we have reached the point in our computing capacity that gamers and designers will be comfortable with the quality and realism provided forever. Basically, that there's no more, after this coming generation of consoles, there are going to be no more consoles. We are at the good enough stage of graphics. And I wrote in here that it seems crazy to talk about that. It's, for somebody who's been in this industry as long as Josh has, they would suddenly just say, that's good enough. But it's one of the things that kind of came to me towards the end of writing this is that it seems that gaming has kind of regressed in a lot of ways, in that the iPhone and the iPad are now, and Integra-based devices are kind of where all the excitement is right now in terms of gaming, not necessarily high-end PC games. But if you look at something like the Samaritan demo and how last year it required 3 GTX 580s to run, and in theory, if they are to be believed, it only requires 1 Kepler GPU to run at the same performance levels today. That's actually pretty impressive. So the editorial...
I will disagree with you on the excitement of handheld gaming. While yes, that's a huge industry, was not 2011 the record-setting year for PC gaming profits? Well, maybe not profits,
up 15%.
But revenues.
Up 15%.
And the argument I've seen so many times with this, and I apologize for interrupting this, but
no,
I remember back in 1999 when 3DFX had the Voodoo 2 out, and we saw all of these kind of speculative pieces about when 3D graphics will be good enough, and everybody kind of came to this 2020 type thing just by going by Moore's law and how graphics have improved, and up to that point. And what they really didn't see is that a lot of has been done in terms of software, in terms of kind of shortcuts and things that they have done to more optimize the image to make it closer to reality, but still not having this pure pixel pushing power and mathematics that we have come to expect from CGI type movies. And so we've kind of compressed that. And the place where we're supposed to be in like 2020 is at like 2015, but then people keep adding other interesting things like 3D vision type applications, much larger displays. We have surround displays. And that's not even just, kind of the tip of the iceberg of the things that they're going to be trying to do in the next 10 years to make sure that people will buy the next generation of graphics products that will never just be good enough for that, high-end application, the crisis of the time. And so, while 2020 is going to be some really interesting looking stuff, I can see both NVIDIA and AMD really doing a lot of R&D in terms of display technology.
So.
Oh yeah, and so it's going to be a long while before we're sitting in a holosuite and a 1980s Cheryl Teague is doing things to you. But anyway,
pushing pixels.
Here's real quick. My kind of argument against that is, so the increase of 15% to 18.6 billion. But if you look at it, Zynga, the company behind the Facebook games, a lot of the Facebook games, brought in 1.1 billion of that 18.6 billion. So I think there's a that is, and that's still considered PC game sales, but I don't think they would be considered PC games in the way you and I are discussing PC games. They're not the crisis. If you look at, they say a lot of the increase is due to the Chinese games market and the popularity of free-to-play games like Team Fortress 2, Star Trek Online, League of Legends, those types of things.
Which is how Nvidia is still selling IGPs.
Yeah, and I want those all to be successful. But I want games like Battlefield 3, Skyrim, Saints Row, Portal 2, Deus Ex to be the ones that drive it, right? Because if it's Zynga driving it, we're okay with an Intel HD 4000 GPU on Ivy Bridge, right? But if it's Battlefield 3 and Skyrim, we are not. And that is, I think, the differentiation there. I would like to see kind of maybe if they broke up stats like hardcore gaming versus casual gaming, and that's a whole different debate that we don't really have time to get into tonight on how those numbers break up. And I am glad to see these increases, but I am worried that maybe we are obfuscating the answer here. Like, are there just as many people playing those hardcore?
More towards casual gaming rather than the stuff that really pushes the hardware.
Or are we including casual gaming just to make sure PC gaming looks good? I guess is the issue. But let's have that debate another night. I'll just look over this Tim Sweeney article. I think it's really impressive. He goes over kind of like a little bit of anatomy background on how the eye works and whether or not Josh agrees or disagrees, and how many frames per second the eye can see, and the 30 megapixel camera and all that kind of stuff. But the numbers he comes with are, what I like is that he comes up with actual numbers, and he's saying that to reach a 8,000 by 4,000 resolution, which is kind of like this maximum level you would need for a 90-degree field of view, which is kind of like this, half surrounding screen. You need 20 to 40 billion triangles per second. If you consider the fact that the GTX 580 today can do 2.8 million per second, we are about a multiple of 50 away from reaching that goal, which is actually fairly attainable, probably in 2 to 3 generations of graphics hardware. But what's more interesting is that, remember the talk that Johan did about Battlefield 3, Johan Anderson, the developer, one of the lead developers of Battlefield 3, talking about lighting and all this type of stuff. Not the solid state, lighting, and how its importance in the visual field, and how it is the new computational boundary that we have to get through. Tim Sweeney went over, the difference between, this gets into calculus, a first order approximation, 1 light bounce, that was Doom. A second order approximation of light, that's 2 bounces, that's like the original Unreal game. And then 3 order approximations of light is like the Unreal Samaritan demo that we talked about earlier. And probably Battlefield 3 would be included in that as well. And if you look at the amount of computing power required for that, it went from 10 megaflops in Doom to 1 gigaflops in Unreal to 2.5 teraflops in the Samaritan demo. And what's the other thing he talks about? Oh, to get like maximum resolution, maximum image quality based on the algorithms that we know today, to kind of do that calculus out to its maximum level, we need about 5,000 teraflops of compute power. And Josh, when do you think we'll get that?
5 petaflops? If you kind of take a look at where we've gone from 1998 to about now, I know you had mentioned 5 to 10 years. I think it's closer to about 2020, 2030, before we see 5 petaflops in a computer. And a lot of really interesting things at the quantum level are going to have to be done to be able to get that on a die that's going to be 300 to 400 millimeters squared.
Coolable.
So it's going to be, we've been able to overcome all of these issues in the past, and we're going to probably keep doing that. But I think that, once we, 5 petaflop in a video card it's going to be a little bit longer, I think, than most people expect.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an interesting editorial. It's an interesting talk that Tim Sweeney gave. on kind of like the theoretical idea and the fact that some people, if they say we're at the end of the hardware development cycle, that they're probably pretty effing wrong. So we took way too long in this segment. We'll take a quick break here. Thank today's podcast sponsor before we get into just a handful of news items and round out the episode. All right, thank you for that. Let's see what happened this week in news. There's some stuff we're calling it back for time reasons again. There were rumors of a Steam box to be announced. Jeremy, what did we think about a so-called Valve Steam box, other than it has a funny name?
Well, as I understand it, the sauna has been talked about many times in the past. This isn't really the first time that we've been hearing about it. But this time, we did actually see a little bit of prediction on some hardware, which does seem reasonable, which was an i7. I believe it was about 6 gigs of memory and some sort of NVIDIA card, which is, hey, not too bad and theoretically coolable inside of a small container, because you're going to want this to be an HTPC-sized device, because it's going to be taking advantage of Valve's The Big Picture, which is a mode where they're going to be able to take a normal game, just translate it to a TV. I haven't really seen the specs on exactly how they're going to do that, but it would be interesting if they could scale it up to a 1080p TV that was of a reasonable size without pixelating it. They've also got an odd-looking but user interchangeable part controller. So you can pull out the joystick and put in a touchpad or a ball or whatever else they can come out with. And they've also been partnering with Razer, and we've actually seen 6 Sense in action in Portal 2. So the idea of actually having a box underneath your TV with a Steam brand on it and a controller that's actually going to make you able to play a much wider variety of games than you would find on a console where everything's developed with that console in mind. The question is, of course, are they going to be able to make money off of it, or are they looking at taking a loss and then just hoping that through game sales, through various Steam promotions and stuff, they'll be able to make their money back? It'd be interesting to see, but honestly,
I think it would be awesome.
Yeah, so you're in the market for that?
I think. No, I just think the idea of having the Steam PC console is appealing. I think there's too many hurdles for them. I don't think they'd ever sell it. I think maybe they would partner with people and make them support it and do all that kind of stuff.
So that would make more sense to me.
Yeah, like the Alienware X51 we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that was like the PC that was in a console shape, would be a good platform for this. It's built
Make
to
sure
go
you
under your
toss in a
TV.
TV tuner card.
Yeah,
If you toss in a TV tuner card, turn it into a PVR at the same time, I could see them being able to partner with certain things.
I think that's too complicated. I think that makes it not a console anymore. I think because then you get into what satellite company do you have? What cable company do you have? Is it compatible? Do you need a cable card? All that other kind of bull crap. And I'd be curious if Valve would then have to go vet each PC game, make sure it runs on this hardware that creates a kind of like a minimum. Not a minimum spec, but they could just create settings that are automatically enabled for each game based on the hardware configurations of each iteration of Steambox that they make, and enable it that way. I think it's doable, and I think it would be great for Valve and for PC gaming in general, just to kind of see things step up that way. But so far, nothing announced at GDC. There's still a couple more days left, but I imagine if they haven't done it yet, they wouldn't. Josh, tell me about MSI's next generation of Twin Frozr 4 graphics cards that you saw at CeBIT, or that we saw pictures of at CeBIT.
Yeah, we're not at CeBIT. Germany's not a particularly great place to visit this time of year, but some people do brave it. And Lab 501 out of Romania, they had some nice pictures of the latest versions of the Twin Frozr 4 based cards from MSI. Now, we had talked to Alex Chang a couple of weeks ago in an interview, and we had mentioned Twin Frozr 4, but they were not very forthcoming about all the interesting things that they'd bring to market. Well, now we finally see that these products do in fact exist. They have the Lightning series. They're reintroducing the Hawk series, and these are all with the HD 7000 products from AMD. We, of course, have not seen the Keplers since they are not announced, but you can bet that MSI is going to be doing that. The Lightning of this generation looks pretty hardcore. In fact, it's so hardcore, there's a separate PCB that you plug into the
Wow.
back of the card, and
Wow.
it gives you like 8 more tantalum capacitors to smooth out everything, including your dog's hair.
What the crap?
It's yeah, we're going to be seeing this ourselves in the next week and a half, and we'll let you
Ew.
know if that actually works. So, a little preview of what's to come. But yeah, MSI is continually
Cool.
moving forward with their graphics cards because that is one of their most profitable sectors of the company.
Hey, I want you to know that Verizon just let me know that I have used approximately 50% of my monthly data allowance on this 4G card.
Your bone, man.
We got to get through this podcast. Jeremy, tell me about Thermaltake's Level 10 mouse and what Peter Pan has anything to do with it.
Well, Peter Pan is, if you don't recognize the name, actually one of the heads of Thermaltake. So you can't let something like that slip by you.
Wait, like for really?
Well, you didn't read it? I'm so sad now.
General Manager Peter Pan had the following to say.
Yeah.
He never
Get magic
grew up.
tricks.
I never liked that guy.
Well, no, and you know, in a way, he's a guy who's running a cooling company. You know, these guys are doing thermoconductive materials and slowly
Sure,
branching out into
sure.
other things. And so they say, I wonder who could help us out. BMW. They're good at designing. Wait, what? You want to make a case and you want BMW to? And we had the level 10 case. And hey, it was incredible. So they did it again. Now you've got
Really
the level
expensive.
10M mouse. And yeah, I bet you this is not going to be very cheap either. But it comes in a variety of colors. And as you can sort of see, it's got a bit of a skeletal design to it because every single piece on this thing is adjustable. The depth, the pitch, the length, everything. Along with, you know, what is it, from 800 from 800 to 5,000 DPI, and you'll also 11 programmable buttons. But you'll also notice that the grill on the top, well, it's of course an LED mouse because if you're going to be paying for, you know, a level 10 case, it's going to have lights and you're going to have a lit keyboard. So now you can have a lit mouse. But don't worry because your hand isn't going to get warm from those LEDs because there's vents bringing air up and into it. So, you know, they have gone to an incredible degree of precision on this thing, as you might expect, being with BMW. If you're looking for a mouse...
This is the Bavarian Motorworks, yeah? He makes a good Zamage.
Very good, very good. So, hey, if you're using a mouse 10 hours a day, it might be worth picking up because, you know, this isn't necessarily just a gaming mouse. It could be an office mouse because, you know, I've stuck at 8 hours, I wish, 9-10 hours at an office. And you've got cheesy little Intella mouse from Intel. Yeah, it works, but after a while, you know, it's not so nice.
I prefer using the touchpad the size of a postage stamp.
Oh, isn't that great?
Yeah.
I like the ones where they've got the little button in the middle as well. You can
I disabled that crap.
Choose your pain. But hey, if you're into mice, this one is well worth checking out.
All right, and the last thing we'll talk about today, we are not typically covering Apple products, but this is something that it's worth discussing. Obviously, Apple announced the new iPad, not iPad 3, not iPad HD, just new iPad. What's interesting to me here is that they're launching a new SoC called the A5X that is still a dual core processor, but what they call quad core graphics. Josh, do you have any idea what that hubbub might actually mean? Are they just talking about like 4 compute units type of thing, like 4 divisions of whatever they have?
It's Imagination Technologies. They have licensed this design. I believe it's the SGX 543, And the previous generation had that product, except it was called the X2. That means it was two of the computational cores of the SGX 543. And this one has four of those computational cores. Now, the only problem that I really see with this is that, yes, they have doubled the graphics performance from the previous generation iPad, but with this Retina display, they have quadrupled the amount of pixels that you've got to paint. Do you see a problem here?
I see a potential issue. Still, the screen looks awesome.
Yeah, I
What's
saw
the
pictures
It's
of that.
2048 by 1536.
Yeah,
You know what that
it's
takes me back to?
beautiful.
It takes me back to the day of my 24-inch CRT screen.
Yeah, I
that
had
I-
only a 22-inch one, but damn, it looks.
I mean, maybe it was 22, but it was like and it weighed like 130 pounds. And the only reason I bought it was because I needed to test graphics cards, and that was the highest resolution you could test. And to think now that you can get that in this super thin 10-inch screen
screen.
it's really impressive. I'm still not sure I want to pay that much money. Like 16 gig Wi-Fi model, $499 is very tempting because it's going to be fast, it's going to be good looking, and but 64 gig 4G LTE models, $829 plus. You got to pay at least what, $30 a month for 2 gigs of data. And what's the point of getting 4G LTE if you're going to use 2 gigs of data? But it's an impressive piece of hardware. And I think TheVerge.com had the only, or at least the first, side by side macro shot of the pixels of the old iPad and the new one.
I think
And
it was an and, wasn't it? Yeah, it was
somebody
stunning.
did. It was.
Different-
It's,
I mean, you.
yeah.
Yeah.
But hey, they'll be available March 16th if you want to spend your money on that. I think like 19 people at PC Perspective already ordered theirs. So
I still don't have a cell phone, so why would I order a tablet?
Oh, he's just talking about Ken and him. The
Yeah,
two of them have already ordered 19.
Well, see, Ken says he hasn't, and I say I haven't, but Alan said he was going to, and Steve said he was going to, and Matt said he was going to. So we'll just have to see. Anyway, let's get out of here real quick. Hardware software picks of the week. I don't really have one specifically, other than that I now have to replace my Lenovo X201. It scares me. I don't like the idea of it not working anymore. So I'm going to be ultrabook shopping. Although I have to tell you guys, I'm on that edge of, I think I should wait for Ivy Bridge before I do it. I think I want to get, I was really interested in, what was that, the HP Spectre that we saw at CES with the glass top and the glass base and all that kind of stuff is really cool. All the connections it had, USB 3 and gigabit Ethernet and that kind of stuff. But I can't make myself spend that kind of money on a notebook when I know the next generation of CPU is like 2 months away. But the problem is I know it'll be, available in a month or two, announced, but then how long will it be till we see ultrabooks and products of that caliber designed and released?
So let me ask you this:
At
though.
that point,
One real quick
Pile Driver
question.
will be coming out. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what Trinity? Would you actually choose between Trinity and Ivy Bridge?
I'd have to see Trinity. Like the truth is, I have more faith in Intel's processor technology now than I do in AMD's. Trinity could be really good, and if they can get me a laptop with similar battery life, with that looks just as nice and is cheaper, absolutely I would do it. But it needs to be shown to me first. I can't, like, show me a Llano laptop. It's been exciting. It's been interesting that people have talked about, and there are very few, if any, even though it's a competitive product. So we'll see. I'll see Ivy Bridge and I'll see Trinity in about the same time frame. So I will be able to make that decision. Although, who knows when I'll be able to buy this stuff. So, oh well. Jeremy, what do you got for us?
Yeah, ever heard an audio guy talk about the Brown Note?
Sounds
Well,
gross.
somebody wanted to play, so a bunch of engineering students decided to, emulate that scene from Back to the Future where Marty sees the
Okay.
giant speakers on Doc's wall and blasts So unfortunately, it's not going to quite blast because it bounces between 5 hertz to 50 hertz, but it's about big enough that in around the time where he suddenly grabs his stomach.
Are those LED lights just for fun?
Hey, if you're going to build a 6-foot speaker, are you not going to put LED lights on it? And give it a mirror finish?
Yeah, I guess.
And his head explodes.
Boom. Hey, great fun. And it'd look
Nice.
wonderful
Like a
in the living room.
Yeah.
Josh, what do you got?
You know what? AMD kind of surprised us. Their new FX 4170 and FX 6200 have arrived in North America in good numbers. You can buy one of those today. So I figured, if you're still curious about AMD, you still refuse to buy an Intel processor, this is not looking like a bad product because the base clock at 3.8 gigahertz is up there faster than the 8150 at regular speeds, 4.1 gigahertz turbo. If you're looking at it, it might be kind of fun to do. If you want something for sure, well, just go get a stinking Intel.
It should be said, we have been trying to get a 6100 and a 6200 now for review, and they pretty much refuse to do it. So we'll give them a couple more days, Josh. We may just buy one. Maybe they're trying to hide something from us. Maybe it's really awesome, and they're all stupid for not letting us test it. Maybe it's really crappy, and they're all smart for not wanting us to. We'll find out.
Yeah, well, no,
it doesn't matter. You're going to do it anyways. I was saying it doesn't matter. You're going to do that anyways.
Yeah,
Josh.
Yeah. Moving on.
All right. If you want to get in touch with us, 1-888-38-PC-PERS, toll-free telephone number. Please call and leave Josh a message. Anybody who leaves a message specifically for Josh, I will make sure I forward on to him, even if we don't play it on the show, but we'll play back a couple. Podcast@pcper.com is the email address. I should say that we're coming up on our 200th episode, and for that 200th episode, we're going to do something really special. Probably going to have a podcast. We're going to solicit listeners to call in and leave voice messages, short voice messages about their favorite PC Perspective moments. So there'll be at least a couple, probably. Remember that time Josh said that funny thing? Yeah. Call in about that. PCPer.com/podcast is the URL for sharing the show with your friends and neighbors. Twitter.com/PCPer, Facebook.com/PCPer, YouTube.com/PCPer. We appreciate if you visit all those places and like us into infinitum. So with that, we will close out this edition of the PC Perspective Podcast. I'm Ryan Schrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
Ta-da.
And good night.
So speak.